We are with Twin Cities Coalition for Justice for Jamar. We have been working for community control of the police for, we've been working on the idea and the legislation and talking about it for a few years now. It comes from, and we'll go into this a little bit in our presentation, but it comes from the Black Panthers in the 60s, kind of brought the idea up. The National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, started in Chicago, we're a member of, drafted legislation most recently, and other groups across the country are working on it. And it looks like Sirius is in the waiting room right now. So yeah, myself, I'm Gina, she, her. Then Jay, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Jay. I'm with Twin Cities Coalition for Justice for Jamar. I've been working with the CPAC legislation writer people since like late summer. So yeah, we're excited to present to you. Sirius, if you want to introduce yourself.
My name is Sirius. I go by she, her, or they, them. And I've been with tcc4j since the late summer.
Cool. And I know there's only one person here, but we do want to apologize for the technical difficulties. The person who set up the link just needed to start the link and we didn't have the permission to do it. So sorry about that. So yeah, to get started, we just wanted to go a little bit over like the history of community control police. Over policing and under protection of Black communities has a long history in America, which originates with police departments being a subsequent formation after the slave patrols. And they've played a central role in enforcing segregation. And in modern times, the primary function of police is eviction enforcement, petty crime arrests, and disrupting organizing efforts. They're not really for the protection of the community because they're not controlled by the community and they're not for the community. And Bobby Seale has a really good quote about sort of the police and how they affect the community. The quote is as follows: "There, the police real power is manifested in the organized guns and force, but we're saying that the people in this community, the people in this country, don't have any control over that organized guns, force, and power. We're saying that the capitalist, the racist, and others have control over it. And we're saying that we want to change it, that we want to revolutionize it, turn it over into the hands of the people for a new process to occur. We're saying we want community control." And so in just like a brief history, in 1970, there was a petition that called for three main things, which were requiring cops to live in the community where they work, splitting up the department into 3 separate PDs, and serving different areas in their case. One for predominantly Black neighborhoods, and one for campus, and one for predominantly white neighborhoods, and establishing a community board with hiring, firing, and policy setting powers. The fight for CPAC is ongoing throughout the country. Probably the most well-formed movement for getting a CPAC is in Chicago, but Milwaukee, Tallahassee, and Salt Lake City are also examples of places that are fighting to get CPACs installed. And so, yeah, we've been doing it in Minneapolis since October 20th, 2017, and are going to tell you a little bit about the legislation that we have written as it exists so far. So I'm gonna do a little brief summary about some of the most important, we think, parts of the CPAC legislation. Article 4, which deals with community input, engagement, and outreach, I think is pretty important because it outlines processes for people in the community to lodge complaints in a way that's much more direct and in a way that allows them to communicate directly with the CPAC. So a CPAC would appoint like a director of community engagement, and they would be in charge of community outreach to solicit public input about police practices and the work of a CPAC. And they would really be explaining to people sort of what a CPAC is, which, you know, to go back and kind of explain what a CPAC is. It's an elected body of people who would oversee the police. And so basically we would have the community engagement director educate people about like how the CPAC elections work, how they can get in touch with members of the CPAC, and how they can file complaints. And they would also sort of report out about the investigative process of any of the investigations that the CPAC would be authorized to investigate. So among the things that a CPAC typically would be investigating would be any allegations of harassment or sexual misconduct on the part of the police, and also any incidences of police murder or brutality. Pretty much any complaint that is lodged against the police, the CPAC would be in charge of investigating. And so they would be tasked with making sure that policy audit and data collection activities were also publicized. And then they would also be developing a process to gather feedback from people who interact with the CPAC in order to improve civilian experience. Because really the main point of a CPAC is to make sure that quote unquote civilians have actual input into how their communities are policed, and that input is ongoing and not just sort of at the beginning of sort of departmental restructuring or changes after the CPAC is implemented. So CPACs would also appoint staff to ensure that civilian complaints are assigned a complaint support specialist, which is really different from how complaints are processed now, which basically they go into somebody's like mailbox and often never get looked at again. The complaint support specialist would kind of be there every step of the way to make sure that the complaint is getting processed properly and that the person who's lodged the complaint is being communicated with and getting information about the status of their complaint, and just like making sure that they are kept up to date on like the process. And then as far as like reports, I don't want to go too much into that because I think it'll be covered again in a later section, but CPACs would issue a number of reports that would be available to the public. And one of the main examples of the types of reports that would be released would be in summary form, obviously without kind of sensitive information, but there would be reports on investigations, use of weapons reports, and video, which right now, the way that video is published by police departments is really like up to the police departments and like the whims of whether they feel that that footage will be beneficial to them and their public image or not. Whereas under a CPAC, video would be published on the website within 48 hours after redacting any parts capturing events within private areas such as a person's home or that would violate clearly established rights to personal privacy, unless the release would seriously compromise the integrity of the CPAC's investigation. So there wouldn't be any more of this sort of like withholding video until like the police can edit it or until they can like release it favorably to the press. And then a couple of the other things that would be available would be like 911 records, summary reports on completed investigations, chief of police response reports, police department complaint. There would be a creation of a police department complaint database so that people could see the disciplinary history for police department members. And then quarterly and annual reports of just kind of summaries of like the numbers of investigations initiated, concluded, pending, or sustained. And so this is just like really a much more transparent way of police discipline. Right now, there's just really not that any sort of that level of transparency at all, and the public really is kept in the dark about police investigations. And family members are really barred from a lot of the information about their cases, and so the CPAC would really make sure that civilians have the ability to be involved in the investigative process, and be able to have information about, like, which officers are being investigated and why, and be able to more directly influence how those officers are handled, and whether they're, removed from their community. So yeah, it's really just about giving people more self-determining power, which I really think is like the main point of a CPAC. So now that that is done, we were going to go over some of the powers that CPACs have, and Sirius is going to go over that section.
So I like everything that Jay said pretty much, because they really covered what I think, I guess the way that I would describe kind of lumps in together what CPAC can do. Some things I guess I can re-say to specify is that CPAC would really kind of take over and be able to be one step ahead, or one up ahead of the police chief, being that CPAC is advocating to be able to hire and fire the police chief. They're also going to try their best to be able to, like Jay said, be able to investigate, really implement more disciplinary actions to officers for those investigations. We're kind of like strong arming them and being able to say, hey, no, like, you're doing this wrong. You're not doing this properly. You're not doing enough. This is what you need to do. And if you're not going to do it, you're going to get fired, period. And then also with it being a community elected board of people, they're also going to be able to have people to be able to input, to hold these people accountable, for them being able to implement disciplinary actions onto the officers as well. So Gina's going to talk more about how the election process goes and things like that. But like I said, basically CPAC is advocating to be an extra outside force that is not the police, because the police policing themselves in investigations is part of a major problem that we are currently facing in our police system. So I'm just going to pass it over to Gina and let her explain more about the format with organizations and elections and things like that.
All right, awesome, thank you. So what's really amazing and revolutionary, one of the things that's really revolutionary about CPAC, which is the Civilian Police Accountability Council, is that it is going to be made up of people from the community. They will be investigating very thoroughly, as much as they can, the police officers in their districts, which in Minneapolis would be the current precincts that we have. The people that are qualified to be on CPAC as the legislation exists right now would be anyone 18 or over who has experience or expertise in protecting the rights of an oppressed group. This experience can come in categories of like protecting the rights of immigrants or homeless or Latin folks, African American or Black or queer, or other groups like that. Or another way you can qualify to be on this board is experience as a survivor or a family member of a victim of police torture and violence. So those are the people who can be on CPAC, who are going to be leading these investigations and directing the police in how they can and cannot police the community. The people who cannot be on this is anyone who has ever served as a law enforcement officer, a county attorney, or been employed by law enforcement union, federation, or lobbying group. So this is the people that have that are going to be running this, not the cops. They will not be allowed in this. Other people who are disqualified would be folks who have been convicted of bribery, embezzlement, extortion, perjury, or other corruption-related offenses. So that's who can be on the CPAC. These people also have to reside in this district for 6 months before they run, and for 2 years in Minneapolis or an immediately adjacent city. Because people in Minneapolis tend to kind of move around a little bit from one suburb to the next, in and out of the city a little bit to try to find affordable housing. We wanted to make sure that people, just living in one of the first tier suburbs did not disqualify somebody. And again, they still would have to live in that specific police precinct or CPAC district in the 6 months before the election. There would be 11 members on this board, and they're slightly weighted towards areas of this city who have been the most impacted by police activity. The offices would be located outside of the police department, so we wouldn't be in the same building with the police, and we would be physically separated from them as well. And CPAC would replace all city agencies or boards or whatever that are currently overseeing police in Minneapolis. So the CPAC members would serve 4 years and would be elected in regular elections, same time as like the school board is elected. And since everybody in a district precinct is impacted by the actions of police, not just registered voters, our legislation has an expansion of voting rights. People, all registered voters can vote for CPAC board members, also non-citizens, and people on parole or probation can also vote. So that's the end of my section. I'll pass it back on to other folks.
I think Sirius is going to sort of talk a little bit about why CPAC is so relevant right now in sort of the current political climate that we're in, and also in the wake of a lot of the different police brutality and state repression that we're facing as a movement. So Sirius, go ahead and take it away.
All righty. So talk about the relevance of why we need CPAC right now. It's really not too hard. I don't think it should be to convince people about, what's going on with police brutality in America, be it recently and more local like George Floyd, or around America with like Patrick Warren Sr. that recently just happened, or if you want to take it back with like Ayanna Stanley Jones, Sandra Bland, Michael Brown, Eric Garner. There's a lot of police brutality that has happened in America. It's been happening even when you want to talk about where police even came from, be it slave patrol. America has a bad history of it. So with it happening right now and continuing to happen right now, with police brutality happening, and we're seeing what's kind of happening with cases still developing. We're still waiting on, verdicts and things like that right now with George Floyd. But when you see what happened with Breonna Taylor's case, and Daniel Cameron being the Attorney General, who has political affiliations with more right-leaning people, and you see what he did with kind of trying to brush off the responsibility that he has as the Attorney General of that area, and saying like, well, there's really not much I can do. I didn't really do my job. I didn't really present that much evidence, but that's not my responsibility, which is not really right, being that he's the Attorney General that presents evidence to the people. But anyways, being that those type of things happen, CPAC would be able to kind of step in and say, hey, we're going to do more investigating. We're going to be able to present more evidence and kind of bring more things to light and put more pressure on people to be able to make more of a difference. Then when you want to talk about more politically and what's kind of going on with our responses to those type of things, with like us immediately after that verdict happened, and the 646 plus people got arrested and kettled on the highway for hours and hours on end. That was the response to us that the governor put on us, being out there. And then you see what happens in DC, where people are allowed to kind of go to the Capitol and storm the Capitol and do a whole mob and stuff like that. So there were 5 people that died there. There were not nearly as many people arrested as were on the highway, and the same police force was not met with those people, as was even with Black Lives Matter events earlier in the summertime in DC in the same area. So being that that's kind of the case, we really do want something, we're trying to advocate for something for the community to be able to intervene in those situations, help to disincentivize this stigma, and double standard that we face as, BIPOC people, and even non-BIPOC people that are also trying to be allies and help us in these situations to kind of fight for justice. So we really want to be able to help out and, like Jay was explaining, investigate these cases, and being that there are going to be people elected into this board that are elected by the people to be able to represent us and help, like I said, to put pressure. That's kind of something that we're looking for, being with everything that's going on and happening. We just want to be able to help and, give another way to be able to help put pressure on the police and not have to face these problems and issues anymore. So, like I said, being all of the stuff going on and everything with the Black people and non-Black people and everything in the country, we really want to be able to do something about it. And this is our solution that we've come up with. So
thank you, Sirius. Just to like add some additional like local clarification, I think that like, a CPAC is direct control over police activities and what they're able to do. And if we had a CPAC in place, like the massive amount of wastefulness of resources that was thrown at us for being on the highway, that would not happen if we had a CPAC. Like that money would not be spent on that, because the CPAC would have direct control over, not just like police behavior in an arrest situation, but also like what sorts of situations police are even called into. And I think that we wouldn't see so much of this just like absolute waste in police going into situations where they have no business being. Police have no business being in mental health crisis situations because they're untrained. They have no business evicting people. They have no business arresting people for being on their own streets that they pay for with their taxes when they're trying to protest against police brutality. It's just simply like we would not have so many of the issues that we're currently dealing with these police departments if there were a CPAC in place. And I think that we really feel strongly that communities deserve to have their own self-determining as far as how they're policed and how police conduct themselves in their community. And I think that after this summer and all of the people that are still held in jail, mostly wrongfully, as a result of their actions during the uprising, and I say mostly because there are a few white supremacists that did get arrested. But yeah, all of these people that are still in jail still haven't really had charges levied against them formally, just kind of sitting there rotting. All of the people that have been arrested on the highway, all of the people that were arrested on New Year's Eve, like we really think that every single one of those people deserves to have self-determinate power as to how they interact with the police and how they are treated in the justice system as far as police go. So yeah, that's pretty much our presentation about CPAC. And we wanted to leave some time for questions. I know there's only 3 of you, But any questions that you have, hey, it means that we can like spend a lot of time on your question. Well, if nobody has any questions, I guess we can close out early. The one thing we did want to also mention, if any of you have sort of people that you can think of that would benefit from hearing more about CPAC, that would benefit from a presentation like this about what CPAC can do. We're really trying to spread community awareness about CPAC and make sure that people know what it is and why we're advocating for it and why we're pushing for it. So if you have like a church group, or you have, Gina suggested a D&D campaign that you think would benefit from CPAC, please let us know. I will put my email in the chat. Actually, I'll put the tcc4j email in the chat. Yeah. And then my email is this. So feel free to reach out to us if you feel like you would want a nice little private presentation put on by tcc4j. But thanks for coming. We're sorry about the technical difficulties and getting started super late. Thanks to the Peacestock organizers for having us, and that's a wrap.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys. Thanks.
Bye.